My brother thought my silence was submission, but it was actually the countdown to his worst nightmare. When Julian demanded I hand over the keys to my beachfront estate as his wedding present, I laughed in his face. He snarled, "You live overseas. No husband, no kids. What do you even need it for?" Before I could answer, his hand flew across my face. The sting of the slap echoed through the room. My family stood there completely silent, expecting me to cry, beg, or cave into his entitlement. But I didn't say a word. I just wiped the blood from my lip, looked him dead in the eye, and walked outside. They thought they had won, that the single, childless sister had finally been put in her place. What they didn't know was that by the next morning, I would launch a revenge plan so meticulous, it would destroy his wedding and his entire financial future. My name is Jacqueline, and at 28 years old, I had finally achieved everything I've ever worked for. Living and working overseas as a senior software architect in London meant enduring endless 90-hour work weeks, surviving on lukewarm coffee, and sacrificing my entire 20s to build a bulletproof career. While my peers were partying, I was investing every single spare dollar. 2 years ago, that relentless grind paid off when I bought a breathtaking beachfront estate in Malibu, completely free and clear. It was my sanctuary, a physical monument to my independence. But to my family back home, my hard work was just an asset waiting to be stripped. In our household, my brother Julian was the undisputed golden child. He was 30, unemployed, and possessed a terrifying sense of entitlement that my parents had actively nurtured his entire life. Whenever Julian failed, my parents forced me to bail him out. I was always expected to twist myself into knots to keep him happy, simply because I was the successful one. What none of them realized was that living thousands of miles away gave me a bird's-eye view of their dysfunction. Over the years, I hadn't just grown distant, I had grown observant. I quietly kept track of every stolen inheritance promise, every maxed-out credit card my parents hid for him, and every minor financial misdeed they swept under the rug. I knew a storm was coming, but I never expected the absolute audacity of the ultimatum they were about to drop on my lap. The trap was sprung during a welcome-home dinner at my parents' house, a lavish affair that I quickly realized wasn't meant to celebrate my return at all. Halfway through the main course, Julian cleared his throat, exchanged a smug look with his demanding fiancée, Vanessa, and dropped the bomb. "Jacqueline, since you live overseas, have no husband, and no kids, we've decided you're going to hand over the keys to the Malibu beach house. It's the perfect wedding present for us." I sat frozen, staring at his casual arrogance. When I firmly said no, the room went completely cold. Julian stood up, his face contorting with rage as he shouted, "You don't even need it. What are you going to do? Let it sit empty while my wife and I struggle." Before I could even process his shouting, his hand flew across my face. The brutal sting of the slap echoed through the dining room, cutting off the air. My lips split instantly, the metallic taste of blood filling my mouth. I looked at my parents, but there was no horror on their faces. Instead, my mother sighed and said I was being selfish for ruining Julian's special milestone. If your own flesh and blood did something this horrific to you, would you walk away in silence or fight back? Comment your thoughts below right now, and please tell me what city or country you are watching from, so I can see exactly how far this story travels. By the next morning, the shock of the physical blow had transformed into a freezing, calculated rage. Instead of packing my bags to flee back to London, I drove straight to my real estate attorney's office downtown. I pulled up the primary deed and registration documents for my Malibu estate, ready to lock down the property completely from any fraudulent transfers my parents might attempt. But as my lawyer pulled up the county clerk's hidden filings, a massive, glaring irregularity flashed on the screen. Julian hadn't just been begging for the house. He had already breached it. 6 months ago, while I was thousands of miles away overseas, my brother had forged my signature on a series of commercial entity filings. He had secretly used my pristine beach house address and its massive equity to register a fraudulent, high-interest business loan for his failing tech startup. He assumed that because I lived in another country and rarely checked physical mail at that address, I would never discover the digital paper trail. He thought he was being clever, playing a high-stakes game with my hard-earned life savings while hiding behind my parents' protection. What the golden child didn't realize was that by tying his illegal financial fraud directly to my asset, he had handed me the ultimate weapon. I didn't just have leverage. I had a direct legal fuse that could completely detonate his upcoming wedding, his reputation, and his freedom. I looked at my attorney, smiled through my bruised lip, and told him to prepare the trap. Julian wanted my house, but he was about to get a lesson in total ruin. To set the trap perfectly, I had to play the part of the broken, defeated sister. I waited until that afternoon, letting them think I was nursing my wounds and packing my bags in shame. When I finally called my mother, I forced my voice to tremble, letting a few fake tears slip through the line. I told her that after thinking it over, I realized family was more important than any piece of real estate. I whispered that I was ready to surrender the Malibu house, but I wanted to do it on my own terms. I told her I wanted to hand over the signed deed and the keys at the rehearsal dinner as a massive, grand surprise for Julian and Vanessa in front of all their guests. My mother gasped with delight, completely falling for the bait. Within minutes, she had text-blasted the entire family, praising me for finally doing the right thing and putting my brother's future ahead of my own selfish desires. Julian even sent a smug text, acting as if the brutal slap from the night before was just a tough love lesson I desperately needed. They truly believed they had broken me, that the single, childless sister had caved under the pressure. They had absolutely no idea that their arrogant celebration was giving me exactly what I wanted. A captive audience for the most public, humiliating downfall they would ever witness. The night of the rehearsal dinner arrived, and the upscale country club venue was packed with the bride's wealthy family, business associates, and all our extended relatives. Julian stood near the head table looking smug in his tailored suit, soaking up the admiration of everyone in the room. When it was time for the toasts, I stood up calmly, walked over to the microphone, and smiled at the crowd. The room fell perfectly silent as my mother beamed from her seat, eagerly expecting the heartwarming speech where I would hand over my hard-earned life savings. I looked directly at my brother and said, "Julian always believed he was entitled to everything I built. So tonight, I brought him the ultimate wedding present." I walked over to his table and presented him with a beautifully wrapped, heavy silver box. Vanessa squealed with delight, assuming the keys to my Malibu beach house were inside. But as Julian tore open the paper and lifted the lid, his smile instantly vanished. Inside the box lay no keys or signed deeds. Instead, it was filled with certified copies of the bank foreclosure notices, the commercial entity fraud filings, and the official police reports detailing his identity theft and illegal loan schemes. He stared down at the documents, the color draining from his face as he realized what he was looking at. Before he could close the lid, I spoke clearly into the microphone so the entire room could hear. I announced that my brother had used my stolen identity to secure a fraudulent loan, and that his entire tech startup was nothing but a criminal scam. Total, unmitigated chaos erupted across the country club venue the exact second my words echoed through the speakers. The bride's wealthy father, Marcus, snatched the document straight out of Julian's trembling hands, his eyes scanning the certified fraud filings and police reports. Within moments, his face twisted in absolute disgust. He turned to his daughter, grabbed her arm, and announced to the entire room that the wedding was officially called off, refusing to let his family be tied to a criminal fraudster. Vanessa began screaming hysterically, tearing off her engagement ring and throwing it directly at his face. My parents jumped up, desperately trying to damage control the situation, but the wealthy guests were already rushing toward the exits in pure panic. Julian completely snapped. He lunged across the formal table toward me, his eyes wild with rage, screaming that I had ruined his life. But before he could even get close enough to touch me, two uniformed police officers stepped out from the shadows of the venue's main entrance. I had called them ahead of time and provided them with the absolute proof of his identity theft and financial crimes. They intercepted him instantly, slamming the golden child face first against the elegant linen tablecloth. The entire room watched in stunned silence as the handcuffs clicked tightly.